I've been able to see the whole broad spectrum of the things that we do out at the INL. In compliance, we need to make sure that we always are in compliance out there. We need to know that we can clean up the legacy of the past where we've had problems, and we need to build our future out there through our research and development. And I will support all of these activities.
Thank you, Mr. Selke. Mr. Lent.
Hey, I appreciate this question. I'll be a strong advocate for the lab. I work on the cleanup side right now, but as a matter of fact, today, one of my responsibilities is to teach supervisors and managers to train them how to be leaders and represent the INL. Today, one of our topics was nuclear citizenship. And we talked about the responsibility we have as employees and workers at the site to protect not only ourselves, but our families, the environment, and the state, and how important it is that we have a safety of culture, and a culture of safety that helps us promote not only just what we do today, but going forward in the future to guarantee more work for the lab.
Thank you, Mr. Lent. The next question will begin with Mr. Morrison. According to a 2016 EPA report, Idaho's temperatures have risen by 2 degrees in the past decade, and there is 40% more carbon dioxide in the air. Recently, UN scientists claim the world has just over 10 years to deal with climate change before it is irreversible. Do you believe Idaho should be active in the fight against climate change, and if so, how? Mr. Morrison?
I do believe we should. There's many things you could do, from recycling is really a key. The temperatures are changing. It's a scientific fact. Most scientists say it's happening. Whether we argue on the reasons why it is or not, it is happening. It's changing our weather. We have a cabin up in Island Park, and we've noticed that the animals that used to be there are now moved north. So it's happening, and we need to anticipate stronger storms and different weather patterns. It may affect Idaho as far as our irrigation goes, because we could have severe areas, severe times of drought. The state just needs to make a commitment to get involved and help not only each city and county, but state government offices as well, with recycling and other programs that recognize the climate change.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Representative Zollinger.
Thank you. Well, obviously climate has been changing for millions of years. We wouldn't have had an ice age. And so yeah, climates are changing. Do I think Idaho should do something about it? I think Idahoans should do something about it. I don't think we need to be regulated. Things are changing as we increase in knowledge about our world. You see recycling programs going around, you see alternative energy sources, and as those become more and more feasible, they're going to be adopted more and more. You see countries that are driving more electronic vehicles, hybrids, and as those vehicles become feasible, which they are, you see more and more of them on the road. I think we should actively encourage people to be good stewards of their environment, to reduce greenhouse emissions, to conserve energy, to recycle, all of those things. I think we as Idahoans need to do that. I don't think we should be mandating, and teaching other countries around the world, because obviously we are not the biggest polluter in the world. Other nations, we need to be educating them of these problems and encouraging them through free trade policies and encouraging them to adopt more environmentally friendly programs as well. So yes, we as Idahoans need to do something, not Idaho as a state through mandates.
Thank you, Representative Zollinger. All other candidates will now get 45 seconds to add on to past responses. Mr. Selke.
Should we be active in the fight against climate change? Absolutely. As a scientist and a person who has worked in climate change science, I can say that the vast majority of the scientists who are involved in climate science understand that it is real, it is happening, and it is human caused. And that is by definition. We know that that's happening by the science and by the definition. How do we adjust to it, or how do we work with it in the state of Idaho? Well, we have three parts. We have the science, and we have some of the top researchers in the country at the University of Idaho working on it up in Moscow. We need to adapt to it. Our departments of water resources, DEQ, and other natural resources agencies are actively working on climate change, and we need to work on mitigation of those climate effects.
Thank you, Mr. Selke. Mr. Lent.
I would also agree that this really is a cultural problem or issue for us that we as Idahoans need to address, not only as a state, but individually. Part of what we really enjoy and love about Idaho is our environment and our ability to recreate. And we need to protect that in the ways of recycling and other things that are important and that contribute to this success. So I would again probably echo a little bit about what Representative Zollinger said about we need to be careful about regulating this and focus more on educating the citizens of our state about the value of conservation and protecting our environment.
Thank you. Mr. DeAngelis.
Well, I agree with Jerry. I taught science at Idaho Falls High School, and I reminded my students, I presented the facts to them from science-based facts that climate change is in fact happening. And if they wanted to see a coral reef, they better get out there and see it soon, because pretty soon they're all going to be dead. As far as Idaho goes, there are several things we can do. First, we penalize people who own electric cars here in this state. We add extra penalties when they register their cars. That needs to go away. We need to work with the federal government to thin out our forests, so when we do have forest fires, we don't have major forest fires releasing more and more CO2 as far as that goes. More wind energy would be good as well. All these things could be worked hand in hand with folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Ehart.
I certainly agree that we are in a period of warming. There's no doubt about that. Now, whether it's global warming, I think that term now is a little more obsolete because we've kind of changed our mind, whether it's climate change. The Earth is always changing. How much manifests, I still don't know, but I do agree that we have to be good stewards of the land. All those things which have been shared absolutely has to take place. And as an Idahoan, as someone who also owns land out in Buchanan County, we want to see that land be well taken care of. And, you know, I will say, thank goodness the Idahoans have enough foresight to have the dams we do, because as we hit this warming period, you know, we're going to need our water and water conservation and good use of these dams and more dams even.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Mr. Selke. In a survey of members of the Idaho Falls community by Compass Academy, we found one of the primary concerns of voters is tax increases and fiscal responsibility. How do you plan on serving the community while not putting a financial burden on Idahoans? Mr. Selke.
It's interesting to me that the issue of financial burden keeps coming up, and to a large extent it's the Republican legislators that keep raising it. And yet we look back and see that we have a 60-year history of the Republicans being in charge. So one of the things I keep wondering about is if we're overtaxed as a state, who's been doing that? Who's been overtaxing us? I would ask for a different paradigm, and what I would say is I think of myself as probably the actual fiscal conservative up here, because I would say that really what is a fiscal conservative here in Idaho? It's a person that not taxes the least, but the person that taxes only what's necessary, only for what citizens of Idaho want and need. And if you fill that mandate of what you're actually giving citizens, what they want and what they need, then that is all you can ask for from a representative. Right now, what we have is a lot of people that do a lot of hyperbole about being overtaxed. And every election, we seem to have another tax cut. That is not necessary. The last one we had was going to be a killer to the future of our kids.
Thank you, Mr. Selke. Mr. Lent.
So I would disagree and say that it's the Republican platform that has really brought us to the place we are today. This isn't such a bad thing, and we're not broken. We have low unemployment rates, historically low. The economy is growing at a great rate. All of those things contribute to the way that the tax base is managed in the state. So I'd like to say my experience on the school board has really taught me a lot about being physically responsible with the taxpayers' money. The process of getting bonds passed and moving to create the needs and meet the needs of the students is really a process of understanding what the needs of the community are and then what they'll support from a tax basis. So in our last bond, we spent a lot of time working with the community, and the end result was the community at that time because we have to have a supermajority, decided that we needed to go back and revisit that and see if we couldn't come up with another answer. That is the process, and that's how it works. I think that has prepared me and helped me learn and understand how to be fiscally responsible for and be accountable from a Republican point of view to the taxpayers in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Lent. All other candidates will now get 45 seconds to respond. Mr. DeAngelis.
Well, we're required by our Constitution here in Idaho to have a balanced budget. But there are priorities in this state, and education is number one. So how do you continue to recruit educators, make our education much, much better than 49th? We need to look at sales tax exemptions, sunset them, review them, and get rid of half of them, because I think half of them we don't need. We need to go back and look at the rich tax shift back in 2006 that shifted everything from property tax to a sales tax, which ruined the state as far as education funding goes. We keep cutting taxes when we don't have to. We're cutting our revenue stream. I'm not for increasing taxes, but let's stop this ridiculous tax cuts. Thank you.
Representative Ehart.
Thank you. I think you serve the community by continuing to be fiscally conservative, because you have to remember what the community is. The community is made up of you, us, and businesses, primarily small businesses, and tax burdens hurt small businesses. I spent 4 years on the Idaho Falls City Council. My mantra during that time was wants versus needs. And I am not opposed to spending. What I want to make sure we do is that we spend it on the things that we need, not the things we want, until those needs are taken care of. And we definitely have needs. One of the needs right now, as I see it, we are a low-wage state. A low-wage state cannot afford heavy tax burdens. We allow the ingenuity of people to thrive when we take the taxes and cut them and remove that burden from the people and allow them to do that which they do best.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Morrison.
I'm glad I get to jump in one ahead of Brian and claim to be a fiscal conservative like the rest of these people. And I am a fiscal conservative. I believe we should only spend the money we take in. And I appreciate Jim. He stole all my thunder here. And I'm actually proud that we have in our state constitution the fact that we have to have a balanced budget. And that has proven to be a good lifesaver when we had the recession. Idaho fared much better than most other states, thanks to our founding fathers. I do think that we can adjust our priorities. We have enough money to do the things we need to. We just have to decide the hard decisions, which those are.
Thank you. Representative Zollinger.
Thank you. I agree with George on that, and you can just write that down as my answer and be good here. But no, I think fiscal responsibility is essential in the state of Idaho. I think to be competitive with our neighboring states, our tax rates in Idaho are higher than Montana, higher than Wyoming, higher than Nevada. So we need to be competitive and lure businesses to Idaho, people to Idaho through lower tax rates. A tax that we need to fix that we passed 2 years ago was repeal of the grocery tax. I was proud to sue Governor Otter to try to get the grocery tax repealed, and I think we need to do that again. We plan on bringing that bill again, and with a new governor, hopefully we can get that through, because that's a tax that burdens low-income people more proportionally than it does people have money. So that's one thing I plan to do, is bring that again.
Thank you, Representative Zollinger. The next question will begin with Mr. DeAngelis. Idaho's minimum wage of $7.25 is equal to the federal minimum wage. In recent years, many states have increased their minimum wage above the federal minimum, including states such as Oregon and Washington. Are you in support of raising minimum wage in Idaho, and what do you think the impact would be? Mr. DeAngelis.
Well, she just mentioned low-wage state tax burdens. No one can live on $7.25. When you look at the cost of living in this state or in any state, cost of food, cost of rent, cost of gasoline, cost of insurance, who in the world in their right mind can live on $7.25? It obviously needs to be increased, and increased to a reasonable level without burdening your small businesses. You look at McDonald's, they hire at $8.50 now, and if you work at night, they give you $9.50. So if they can do it, how do they manage that? They increase their prices. Their dollar burger went up to $1.25. So you're willing to pay for it? I don't see any line shortening at McDonald's. We can afford to raise our minimum wage to a minimum of 10 to start, and then indexing each year 50 cents, $1 whatever. It's, again, teamwork, talking to the people within the legislature. Let's get serious about helping our working poor people and give them a chance at life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. Representative Ehart.
I absolutely do not support the government getting involved in raising the minimum wage. That is not our role. I started out working for the city of Idaho Falls when I was a youth. You know what the minimum wage was? $2.90 an hour. The minimum wage is intended for those who are starting out. They're intended for teenagers. Do some others use it? I'm sure they do. But when you start mandating a minimum wage, you start eliminating people who are able to get jobs, and you start eliminating the youth. We allow the businesses to dictate. That's what it means for the government to get out of the way. If a business is doing well and they want to attract a better worker, they're going to offer a better wage. McDonald's absolutely is a great example. They decided to do that on their own, allow McDonald's to do it. And if they think they can afford the cost of their hamburgers going up 25 cents, 50 cents, and still make a profit, then McDonald's will do that based on that which they're doing with their business. It is not for the government to dictate that and to decide. We have to understand that it's an artificial inflated wage anyway, because yes, everything else will go up, and who will it be passed on to? Us. It's an artificial wage, my friends. So no, stay out of it.
Thank you, Representative Ehart. All other candidates will now get 45 seconds to respond. Mr. Morrison.
Well, speaking of an artificial wage, because of the low wages, stores like Walmart, one of the things they give their new employees are forms to fill out so they can get government welfare, food stamps and whatever. And that means all of us are subsidizing Walmart, the richest company in the world. I don't agree with that at all. Make them pay better wages, and the taxpayers won't have to support that kind of activity. It's meant for more than teenagers. It's meant for families and people in general that are working without proper skills.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Representative Zollinger.
Thank you. I believe strongly in free enterprise. I think free enterprise is what has made this nation and this state exceptional. No other country in the world has ever been able to replicate what we have here in the United States, and that's through the free market system. No legislator can overturn the law of demand, and that's what should dictate wages, the law of supply and demand. In fact, there's a direct correlation. If you raise these wages, employers are going to find ways to cut labor. It happened when Obamacare was passed, and people had to employers of a certain size had to provide more benefits. They laid people off. The law of supply and demand will increase wages as the demand. And right now, with record unemployment in the state, we're seeing that. More jobs available, those wages are going to increase because there's competition for those jobs.
Thank you, Representative Zollinger. Mr. Selke.
Yes, am I in support of raising minimum wages? Yes, I am. You know, it was stated that, the minimum wages was set up for kids. 21% of Idahoans working right now are working for minimum wage or less. That's not right. How does somebody make a living off that? That's what we call our working poor. Those are the people that are working 3 jobs to try to make ends meet. Those are the people that can't stay home and take care of their family, can't take care of their kids because they're out working those 3 jobs. I think that when we talk about putting people out of work, well, the truth is that why should somebody be working for slave wages? If we can't keep everybody employed, let's look at how to take care of them when they're not employed, and let's take care of giving living wages.
Mr. Lent.
What I felt when I was growing up working for my dad in the gas station, $1 an hour, that was slave wages. I would not be in favor of raising it because I don't feel that it's meant to be a living wage. I think it's meant to be an entry-level wage. And my proposal would be not to try to go around the free enterprise system, let the free market guide and dictate. The example that was used was McDonald's. I hear other examples around town where they're paying more than minimum wage because that's what it takes. My answer would be workforce development. Let's not worry about staying with minimum wage. Let's provide educational opportunities so that they can move up in the educational and wage process in their careers and make more money.
Thank you, Mr. Lent. At this point, we will be switching the order of responses and going from right to left instead of left to right in the interest of political fairness. So this next question will begin with Representative Zollinger. According to the Post-Register, the ratification of Proposition 2, which would expand Medicaid in Idaho, would end up providing health care coverage to 62,000 more Idahoans. What is your position on Proposition 2, and how do you think it will impact your constituents here in eastern Idaho?
Thank you. Excellent question. Obviously, that's a very relevant topic right now. I, again, believe in the free market system, and I think in this country over the last 40 years, we've destroyed the free market system in healthcare, and we need to get back to a free market system where there's competition, where prices are published, so we know where we want to go and shop for the healthcare we need. I believe healthcare rates have to come down. Everybody knows that's the problem right now, our healthcare rates. Medicaid expansion, Obamacare expansion is a Band-Aid. So I am against Proposition 2 for a myriad of reasons. I believe we can find a solution to cover people. There are several solutions, like lowering the cap. People now are getting 400% of the federal poverty level get subsidies. People below 138 are not. Why don't we lower that to 300%, cover the people that are making 138% and below? That would, again, be a Band-Aid, but that would be a temporary solution to fix this. There are temporary solutions we can do to fix this while we try to restore the free market in healthcare, because it's not just people in the gap that are struggling. It's families that can't pay high copays, high deductibles. In fact, most of the medical debt in this state right now are not from people in the gap. That's about 3% of the people in the gap. It's people, families that can't afford the deductibles and the high pays. We've got to reduce the overall cost of health care to solve the problem.
Thank you, Representative Zollinger. Mr. Morrison.
Well, there's been batting this thing around for 4 years. It's getting to be kind of a worn Band-Aid. Governor Otter came out today in favor of it and says it's a good idea. It's one thing I agree with him on. It is a good idea. It's the hard way to pay for medical care, because we're using a catastrophic fund, and it ends up that the counties and the cities pay for the people that end up using ER, and some of that ER usage can be reduced if people have medical care as a preventative measure, not just as a Band-Aid. It'll also help rural hospitals that are struggling because they're having a hard time paying the bills for the emergency care. So there are solutions. Lowering the distance there, that's a pretty good start for something, but we have to go much farther and make sure everybody is covered with some kind of health care plan.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Representative Ehart.
I certainly am another one who believes in the free market. And, you know, I find it hard and difficult to look to those who created the problem with Obamacare to now come in and solve the problem. We do that way too much with government, and it doesn't work. And I would ask you to take the time. I have spent hours and hours going through and looking at every other state that has adopted Medicaid expansion. And the numbers of every other state that they said would enroll, and the dollars that they said it would cost has far exceeded anything even close to that which they stated. So if, you know, what did they say the definition of insanity is? Doing the same thing over and over. We've had the test pilots from tons of states. And I just again read the governor from Kentucky's letter to Utah explaining there's the lie, what's going to happen. It's not.
Mr. DeAngelis.
Well, I was one of the ones out there collecting signatures for Proposition 2. I'm all in favor of it, many, many reasons. I think all Idahoan citizens should have primary medical care. There's too many people going without it, too many people with chronic diseases who can't see a doctor, they can't afford to see a doctor, they're dying, cancers not picked up early. I mean, let's face it, our rural hospitals, 27 out of the 40 hospitals in the state are rural. And without Medicaid expansion, you're going to start to see a lot of these hospitals closing, and you can blame the people who are going up against Proposition 2. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. Mr. Lent.
You know, for me, I had to boil it down and try to really simplify this. And for me, it comes down to there's an emotional aspect to this, and there's a financial aspect to this. The emotional aspect, do we have a responsibility to take care of our folks and provide health care for those people in the gap? The financial responsibility is, as you've heard before, the state constitution requires us to have a balanced budget. So on one hand, we want to take care of our own, and on the other hand, we have to figure out what the priorities are because there's only a finite amount of money. Where the challenge comes in for those of us who are opposing it is the fact that the numbers are soft when it comes to how many people will actually participate in the program. Matt Bevin, who Representative Ehart was referring to, and he is the governor of Kentucky, and he has an open letter to the state of Utah. I'd
Thank
encourage
you,
you to read
Mr.
it.
Lent. Mr. Selke.
So it was stated that we should allow the open market to take care of this issue for us. In a lot of cases, I'm a believer in the open market, but you know, what's the result of the open market from before Obamacare? Well, 62,000 people without medical coverage. If the state cannot help take care of the health of their people, what is the purpose of the state? I don't get it. It just seems pretty straightforward. So that's the emotional side. The emotional side is we need to take care of each other. We need to work together to take care of each other. Financially, this balances out. This balances out. The amount that it'll cost us will be covered by changes in how we take care of indigent care and taking care of county obligations.
Thank you, Mr. Selke.
Thank
This question will begin with Representative Ehart. According to Idaho Education News, Idaho ranks 50th in access to pre-K, 49th in per pupil spending, and 9th in SAT scores of the 11 states who have an SAT participation rate of 90% or higher. What issues would you tackle first in our education system, and how would you like to see improvements made?
Well, first and foremost, I have to give a huge shout out to our teachers because we have some of the most phenomenal teachers. And I know sometimes as some of the statements are made about our education in regards to teachers and keeping them, it almost sounds like we don't value those who we have. And even our students here will let you know we have fantastic teachers. So, you know, as Stephen Covey would say, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, and he'd talk about making sure that you take care of the goose that lays the golden egg. And as our teachers are, as we continue to make sure our teachers are taken care of, and yes, some of that continues to mean more financial stability, that's where we need, in my opinion, to begin to look for some of the solutions to any of our problems that we have as far as test scores. Now, I will say, though, as we're looking at some of those which you presented, I'm looking at others. I'm looking at our test scores continuing to rise, including the fact that Idaho is 5th best in the nation, according to U.S. News and World Report, for college readiness. And I was touting that before everybody else on the Republican team started touting that. Those are impressive stats. That means our teachers are doing something right. I will tell you this, though, as we look here on one of the things you asked about pre-K, I'm not in favor of taking money and putting it to pre-K. Good heavenly days, we don't even have a full-time kindergarten program. Where are we going to get the money to do that?
Thank you, Representative. Mr. DeAngelis.
Well, being a teacher, I see lots of problems with the education system in Idaho. When 2008 hit, we lost so much money in our schools, cut back programs, got rid of the arts, got rid of phys ed, etc. We need to attract the best teachers in this country. Let's face it, the state needs the best teachers, and we're not giving it to them. You got a career ladder that's more of a career step stool. You can't attract quality teachers with a starting pay that low. We need to increase minimum 40 to start, probably 50,000. You say, where is the money coming from? Again, reverse some of these tax shifts, go through your tax exemptions, stop the tax cuts. Our children are the most important part of our state. Let's face it, this is our future, and without that, we're shot. Pre-K universally recognized as the key to success in future, getting the kids ready for third grade reading levels, etc. We need to improve our schools that are crumbling. Rural schools cannot attract any teachers at all. We don't have aides in the classrooms anymore. We've got so many unaccredited teachers working here. Why are they leaving Idaho? Why can't we attract the best teachers? It's ridiculous.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. All other candidates will now get 45 seconds to respond. Mr. Lent.
Thank you. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Over the last 12 years, I've really had the opportunity to see what difference spending makes. And I'm not convinced that spending more money has academic results as far as students are concerned. So I would propose, and this is, it says, what would you tackle first? The first thing is change the paradigm of our educational system. We really have an industrial model, you've probably heard this before, on an agrarian calendar in a digital age. The time has come for us to change that. Compass Academy exists because as a member of the school board, we decided that we could do better and we needed something to evolve the education system in our community. We went out and found the model that is now Compass Academy and implemented. So it was created as a catalyst for change, and that's how it came to be. It's a great thing.
Thank you,
So,
Mr.
thanks.
Lunt. Mr. Selke.
Yeah, so if we take a look, Dave just said that funding isn't the important thing here, but if you think about it, how many people sent their kids to a private school and said, yeah, I'll go to the cheapest place possible? You don't do that. That's not the market model. The market model is that we need adequate funding to do our education. And we haven't had that here in Idaho since 2006, when it was decided that we would take the primary focus for funding schools being property taxes and switch it to sales taxes. Since then, we have had soft money and we have hurt our students. We have an entire generation of students that have not had adequate education because of the
Thank you, Mr.
decision of the
Selke.
legislature.
Representative Zollinger.
Thank you. I too am passionate about this, as being one of the only legislators with children in school currently. In fact, I guarantee I'm the legislator with the most children in school right now, also serving on District 91 School Board. This is why I got into politics. I'm passionate about education, and Idaho is really a great place. We see these numbers touted that we're 49th. Well, that's at 49th in spending, but spending does not correlate to success. Families and parents helping students correlate to success. I want my children to be home in pre-K with their mom, learning from their mom. They enter school a lot more advanced. Right now we rank 5th in the nation for college readiness. During my tenure, we're 1st in the nation year to year in teacher pay increases, and we need to continue those trends, and I think we can. We have the access to funds to do this, and we will continue to increase teacher pay to recruit the best teachers, but we're in a good place right now.
Thank you, Representative Zollinger. Mr. Morrison.
Well, funding does play a big role in schools, and if you ask some of the rural school districts that are on 4-day schedules, they'll kind of verify that for you. I think one big thing that we can do, and this has also been one of my passionate ideas, is that teachers need to have the same respect and awe that doctors have. We need to change our social culture to make that job seem to be the very most important thing that it really is, because they're teaching your children. Your children are your most precious asset.
Thank
Also,
you, Mr.
I agree-
Lent. Mr. Morrison,
Sorry.
I apologize. We will begin this question with Mr. Lent. Here at Compass Academy, we have an annual mental health awareness campaign called More Than a Stigma. Due to this, a prevalent concern we have is teen mental health and the suicide rate, which is the second leading cause of death for Idahoans aged 15 to 34, according to the Suicide Prevention Action Network of Idaho. If you are elected, do you plan to address this concern, and how?
That's a great question, and as a member of the school board for the last several years, I've taken the opportunity to go to the national conventions. And each year, over those last 12 years, there's been terrible things happen in our schools throughout the United States. I've made it a point to sit in each one of those seminars and learn from the people who are actually at those schools and nationally recognized experts on school violence. It was really interesting to find out that the main thing, of course there's a myriad of things that come into play, but they always said that people tend to migrate towards physical security because they're comfortable with that, it's easy to understand. When in reality, that's only one piece of it. What they really promote is mental health and getting a hold of these issues with kids before it happens, really on the preventative end versus on the reactive end at the other end. So I support this greatly. In our family, we had a young man a few years ago take his life. His mother has been very active throughout the state in promoting suicide prevention. In fact, I spoke at this young man's funeral. So very committed to mental health. I think we need to put more emphasis, even in the new school plan for security.
Thank you, Mr. Lent.
Okay.
Mr. Selke.
Yes, I agree a lot with what Dave said. We can't go and make prisons out of our schools. We can't go and armor our schools. That's dealing with the symptom, not the cause. The cause is a combination of socioeconomic issues and mental health issues. Social economic, we're putting families, many families in this state at risk of having kids that are full of anxiety and problems because we don't have good jobs. We have people, 21% of our people are working on minimum wage or less. We have issues with schools, poor schools. We have issues where we have students that aren't getting the help that they need because we don't even have enough or we're not funding enough to even have teachers in all the classrooms we need. We can't even fund 5 days of education for a lot of small rural schools. We need to take care of these underlying social economic problems to help remove some of the anxieties and the problems that we're having that are coming down on our students and others and causing these problems rather than looking at physical fixes.
Thank you, Mr. Selke. Representative Zollinger.
Thank you. I too would support additional funds for mental health. I think it's crucial, but I think that's, again, just it's a symptom, a cause, or it's the result of several symptoms, and certain things bring happiness. It's been proven that freedom brings happiness to people. We need to get rid of regulations that are harming kids. I agree with Mr. Selke that schools shouldn't be prisons. I think our society is caustic, and the underlying problems are we've got to be nicer to people. We've got to follow Christ-like principles. And I'm proud to sit to the man beside me because we've become good friends, and he's a great example of how we can have these political discussions. You read the newspaper and TV, and it's just horrible what's happening, and this filters down to children and causes unhappiness. We think we live in this horrible world, but the world is good, and we need to just follow those principles and fix the underlying problem.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Morrison.
Thank you, Brian. It is a cultural change that we have to deal with. It's such a deep problem, and we all have to learn how to pay attention to changes in our children, changes in anybody, and find out why those are happening. So often those things get ignored. It's an important thing. So society needs to jump in at this thing as a whole group and deal with it. It's not one or two things that are going to fix it. It's everything that's going to fix it.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Representative Ehart.
I certainly agree with both of them, and unfortunately, this issue has hit pretty close to home with me. As I'm sure many of you, I was just sitting here thinking how many young people I know over the last couple of years and with whom I've dealt personally that have taken their lives. So it is a personal issue. I came to the presentation that you guys had in the spring on, was it Screenagers, or it was the presentation also dealing with mental health, and I'll tell you what, very impressed, had an opportunity to speak with your counselor in more in-depth and with a gal friend of mine here who's also in counseling, and the first thing that I've already started advocating for that would help immediately, I believe, is another counselor in our schools. There are counselors wear too many hats right now.
Thank you, Representative Ehart. Mr. DeAngelis.
Well, you have to look at some of the causes of suicide. Why? I've known people with children, friends of mine who've killed themselves. You have to look at what are the causes. Cyberbullying, you're gay, you're transgender, you're the wrong religion. Sorry, can't deal with you. You're black, you're Hispanic, you're different. We can't have this. We need teachers, we need counselors who are trained to recognize problems before they really get to the point. And we need mental health counselors, we need more help, behavioral health, to help these kids. And if you see something, help them. We had places in Idaho Falls High School where we actually had a classroom set aside specifically for gay students so they didn't have to get harassed and bullied during lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. The next question will begin with Representative Zollinger. According to the most recent census, Idaho is the fastest growing state in the nation. If elected, what projects would you prioritize in order to deal with this growth?
Thank you. It's an excellent question, and I think it's a wonderful thing, and it bodes well to the financial policies of this state and what's happened in this state over through the conservative policies we've had for the last 20 years. The people from states like California, New York, and Illinois are fleeing here We call them political refugees. They're trying to come for lower taxes, for the freedoms that we enjoy, as well as the natural beauties of Idaho. So I think we need to continue those policies. We need to continue to work to reduce taxes for everybody, get rid of the grocery tax, and continue these economic policies that are inviting businesses into the state. Right now, the unemployment rate in the state is amazing. Just about anybody who wants a job can go out and find a job with the unemployment rates we have. So we need to continue to push these economic freedoms, lower taxes to encourage these businesses. We need to continue to improve our education system, keep up the current trends we have of funding teachers better, and those need to be trends that happen year after year, not just for the past 4 years. And I think if we continue to do these things, these are the type of projects, do those things that are essential for government, those things that are necessary, and leave everything else to the private market, and we'll continue to have a great state for people to move to. So those are the policies that I would seek to implement.
Thank you, Representative Zollinger. Mr. Morrison.
Well, obviously, we're going to have to prepare our school districts and our schools for such a growth. I lived in Nevada when they were getting 50,000 people a month in the state, and they were building a school every week. So we need to up the ante on our schools to meet this growth. Another thing is the state needs to stay out of the cities and counties' business. The cities want to do a lot of things and would be able to do a lot more things if they didn't have restrictions put on them. They need more freedom. We talk about that, more freedom. Let's give it to the cities and the counties. Probably Ms. Ehart has dealt with some of those problems as a city councilwoman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. All other candidates will now get 45 seconds to add on to past responses. Representative Ehart.
Excellent. You know what? We are absolutely, this state is on an economic path of prosperity, and it is due to Republican policies. And when I speak with businesses, not just in the city of Idaho Falls, but throughout the state, they unequivocally state why they are coming here. And they are coming here because of what we offer, both financially and tax-wise. And then as soon as they say that, they turn around and complain about our income tax rate compared to the states surrounding us. And we took a big step this past year in working to address that. So we are on the right path. I lived for 15 years outside of Idaho Falls and made a conscientious decision to return because of this state and the people. I love Idaho and I love it here.
Thank you, Representative Ehart. Mr. DeAngelis.
Well, people are coming here not because of low taxes. They're coming here for several reasons. One, because we have natural beauty in the state. I mean, let's face it, the quality of life here is phenomenal. What we need to do, prioritize to continue this growth, we need broadband, high-speed internet access throughout the state, not just in cities, throughout the state, including the rural areas. We need a talented workforce. That's why businesses come here. They're looking for talent. And how do you get talent? You get the colleges and universities working with businesses so they can actually set up programs to provide that workforce. Aside from that, what can I tell you? Grocery tax can be lowered as well. I agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeAngelis. Mr. Lent.
Thanks. I think one of the reasons as we talk about our growth we need to be really careful about is we hear a lot that we need to change. We're broken. Everything's wrong with our state. We need all this change. I think it's the values that drive people here and that keep us here, the values that we enjoy. If we talk about two things that I think I would prioritize, one is be an advocate for the INL. I can speak the language of the INL and speak very strongly as to the value that the INL adds not only to our state but our community. The other one is to reinvent K-12 to K-career. I'm working with the College of Eastern Idaho right now with the INL and our companies to build a pipeline that we can start kids taking classes in